Are you an ambitious leader ready to break through limiting beliefs, align with your purpose, and thrive in your career without sacrificing your well being or postponing your true desires? I'm Diana Ordonez, certified high performance coach and your host. Each week, we'll dive into actionable insights and research based strategies to help you unlock clarity, build unshakable confidence, and take courageous action toward a life of impact and fulfillment. If you're ready to overcome fear, embrace growth, and step boldly into your next level, you're in the right place. Let's create a life filled with courage and purpose together. Welcome back, everybody, to Courage and Purpose. I am joined by Marcy Luna today, certified high performance coach and fitness physiologist. Now, this is the first time I hear this term. So for everyone listening, I would love to kind of get an idea. What is a fitness physiologist?
Yeah, so the actual term is exercise physiologist, but it all kind of means the same thing. But really, so physiology is simply the study of the systems and the cells in our bodies and how they interact and what happens. So as an exercise physiologist, I'm interested in studying what happens when we exercise at the cellular level. What are our muscles doing that impact our brain? What is our heart doing that impacts our muscles? Like how does it all work together? Because honestly, as a human being, what is happening under the hood is possibly the most fascinating thing. And it's, in my opinion, where our power lies. Because when we understand what's going on, we have the power to choose how we want to, leverage it or how we want to adjust things. So, as an exercise physiologist, I just obsess about how we think and how we feel and how we can think better and how we can feel better at the end of the
I
day.
love that. I love
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today. I think we're talking about a topic that affects a lot of high performance leaders in organizations, entrepreneurs, uh, especially those that have kind of been pushing in their career as a high priority, right? And have started to feel like they're starting to either plateau or burnout. And so you have a webinar, which I was happy to attend and get some already, insights into the things that you teach called Stress Less, Motivate More. And I love this topic because there's so much that we can talk about, but especially because of my background, I know Marcy, you know a little bit about it. I started off as a product management director. Well, I didn't start there, but that's kind of where I started my high performance coaching
Yeah.
journey, right? So I was in this high stress environment. And some of it I recognize now was very self created, right? And I was hitting this kind of plateau, burnout place in my career where I actually needed to step away, right? And I noticed now that some of it was self created because as a very type A, high achieving person, I really used stress as a major motivator. And so if you're saying stress less, motivate more, I think some of us can really resonate with that because sometimes like the pressure did allow me to perform better, which
Mhm.
then, reinforced that behavior, that habit. And then I got a reward for it. And so it was like chronic stress eventually, because what I recognize now is everything that you teach about the nervous system, which is, once you are in that state that you can't get out of, it just becomes your new norm. And
Yes.
so, talk about what you mean when you say stress less, motivate more.
Ah, of course. So, yes, the physiology of stress. So, again, physiology, just how our bodies are functioning at the cellular level, how different systems are interacting. So, what's happening there under stress? This first came to my interest when I had this rip-roaring case of eczema for a couple of years. And it was so bad that it was like I had road rash all the time. My fingers, like around the nail bed, was all deformed and a rash. And I couldn't figure anything I tried, it didn't work, or it worked for a day and then it would come back. And it was very painful. And finally, it was just like, okay, Marcy, this is just because of stress. And I was in a tense relationship, but not like a high intensity all the time stress. So I wasn't perceiving stress. I had two little kids. It was just my new norm, right? My norm was this baseline of stress. And I was really upset when that relationship ended. But when the relationship left, shockingly, my eczema left. And then I was like, wait,
Wow.
I want to understand this because this is what I that's what I study. I want to understand why, like what happened in my body under stress that created this weird skin condition that I could not get rid of. And everybody's telling me, stop eating this, stop doing that. So many things. So I dove into stress physiology and we need stress. Stress is absolutely essential to our lives. Like we would not be healthy or vibrant without stress. So I'm not saying don't have any stress, but where's the place where we can leverage using stress? Like you talked about, we can really motivate with some stress. We can get excited to do something that's stress. But here's the key differentiator is can we get stressed, create that arc of motivation, do the thing, and then recover.
Mhm.
What we stop doing is recovering. And if we're in a tense environment or if we're in a constantly chasing the next achievement mindset, then we're hammering on that stress system at a certain level all the time. And when we do that, we start creating this baseline of chronic stress. So then we're no longer leveraging stress because then we have to create more intensity to feel an impact of motivation. And then we start at some point wondering why we're feeling burned out. So, what I want to invite people to do is to explore different ways of thinking and different ways of caring for their bodies so they can lower the baseline of stress and increase more capacity to handle the stress in life. Because when we start operating up here at the near the ceiling of our capacity for stress all the time at a baseline, we don't have much room. And that's when we start snapping at people and everything feels overwhelming. We can never feel rested. All of those symptoms start popping up, and we're like, wow, I guess I'm just burning out. And I mean, that's a fair, definition if you want to call it that. But what are the ways we could think about ourselves, think about our practices? I was about to say habits, and some of them are habits, but habits are sort of unconscious. And I think we have to create some conscious
Mm.
practices to lower the temperature of stress in our bodies. When we wake up in the morning and we are underslept, underhydrated, overfed, undernourished, overwhelmed, we're in a body that is already a 7 or 8 out of 10, and we're just starting our day.
Right. I love what you said there because people think stress is just like pressure, right, from work or from life situations. But you're talking about you're already starting at a 7 or 8 in stress because of the stress that we put on our bodies with the things that we eat or don't eat. The amount of sleep that we're giving us or not giving ourselves, like all not hydrating, all those things are actually causing stress. Whether
Mhm.
you're mindful of it or not, your body becomes a body
Yeah.
that's under stress. Um,
Right. And well, anybody listening who is feeling really stressed and overwhelmed, and then they hear me talk about like hydrating or
mhm,
nourishing differently or exercising or
mhm,
whatever, it feels like piling on.
right.
So I just want to say that if anybody is hearing that and is just like, oh my gosh, turn it off because I cannot handle another thing on my plate, like take a deep breath because there are ways to access more possibility through just shifting kind of unlocking some ways of thinking and some simple tools. So it doesn't have to be a total overhaul. And I do not recommend doing a total overhaul because total overhauls are pretty stressful and
Right.
hard to do.
Right.
So it's, when we change one thing, we can change a lot of things. And it doesn't have to be more, it could even be less. So there really are some tweaks if you can get curious enough to learn, to learn something different, right? Not more, just something just a little bit different, less coping consumption and more, power to what you want.
Love that. So,
Yeah.
so you said something funny. You know, don't do a huge overhaul of all your stuff, right? And for me, I know once I was kind of in that high stress pace for a long time, an overhaul was what was like comfortable. No, I have to do, it's all in, right? And
Yeah.
I'm still somewhat an all in kind of a person.
Yeah.
But I recognized that because it became my norm, it was comfortable, and then it actually became really uncomfortable when I wasn't in that mode.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was actually harder to be in silence and rest. It was harder to do that than to just
Ah,
keep pushing. Even though it was hard to
yeah.
do that too, it was just uncomfortable to be resting.
Yes.
And
Oh my goodness. Spoken as a true high achiever right there.
so it took some work because what made it most uncomfortable, I think, is that there were, like you said, mindsets, belief systems around what it meant to be resting.
Yes.
And so I had a hard time with things like really just anything that felt fun.
Yeah. Well, because that was not achieving, right? Fun is for, I don't know, sometime later down the road. Or fun becomes
Mm,
just like when you're trying to cope. And so nothing is fulfilling anymore. And I think that is there's some there's some signs and symptoms that I think are relevant to share. And some of these signs and symptoms are when you have a hard time having fun anymore, when everything feels kind of heavy and like pressure, and the
mhm,
smaller things become bigger things, right? Like something that in the grand scheme of things is not a big deal
mhm.
feels like a big deal when we
Because it
wake
feels
up
like
feeling
one
tired.
more thing, right?
Yes. And we wake up tired and
Hmm.
we go to bed wired and
Mm,
we are constantly running on the wheel. And I can speak to this because I've experienced it, right? I know that feeling. And even as somebody, I just, moment of truth and vulnerability, even as somebody who studies this stuff, I have caught myself down the path of stress and overwhelm. As a matter of fact, I remember a few years ago, my daughter saying more than one time, like, Mom, are you okay? Like,
mm,
what's going on with you? And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm fine. Right? When you have that, because the system is going to defend the system. Your
right.
body thinks it's in survival and it is going to defend surviving. And then we get adapted to this certain level, this sort of buzz of overwhelm and busyness and rushing and doing. And it feels really bad to be still. It is
And
very uncomfortable.
yeah, it's uncomfortable. And when I say that, it's not like it was not just uncomfortable. Many times it felt more like guilt,
Yes,
right?
yes. Well, because you have something you're supposed to be doing at all times. And if I'm just going to
Right.
pause, like, well, I'm not doing the thing. I'm not getting to the next thing. There's more to be done. I'm whatever. And then truly, what we're setting ourselves up for is a crash of some sort. Eventually, the house is going to burn down. Either we burn it down, like we do something dumb and burn it down, or we lose the relationship, or something happens with our health, or something happens in that situation. Like it eventually will crash and burn. Like we can't sustain that forever. The
Mhm.
system is not designed to do that. The stress system is designed to be for short term, and that's powerful and that's good. And then we have to recover. And there's this moment of opportunity to recover that so many of us just skip right over. I'm going to be a higher achiever and do more. So when we get locked into that system, what I want everyone to know is that it is going to feel uncomfortable for a bit, but not forever. When something feels bad, it feels like it's going to last forever. Have you ever noticed that? Like when you're having fun or you're doing something and you're really enjoying it, it's like, oh my gosh, that went so fast and it's over. But then when we're doing something that is uncomfortable, like I saw a cartoon once that said the best way to keep meetings short is to do them like this. And it was a picture, a cartoon of everybody on in plank position on their laptops, like doing a plank. When you are in a moment of an exercise thing that's very uncomfortable, it feels like it's going to last forever. Time slows down. It actually happens in our brains. Time slows down. When things feel hard, it feels like it's going to be forever.
Mhm.
Like that is a psychology that we have. And so I'm emphasizing that because it really requires that we understand that this discomfort will pass. But when it won't pass, if I feel uncomfortable, pausing, and because of that discomfort, now I'm going to go to a coping strategy. Now I'm going to pick up my phone and watch TikTok for 3 hours. Now I'm going to go to the next thing. We accidentally take breaks in that way. Like social media is designed for that. And I'm not against social media at all, but it's designed to catch you off guard. All of a sudden, it's an hour later.
Mhm.
If we take intentional breaks instead, and we sit in a little bit of discomfort and we regulate our nervous system, now we're generating more energy to go do the next thing. Like it's that simple of recovery.
Mhm.
So depending on the situation, somebody might need a longer arc of recovery, but we can step into it with baby steps. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean go, take a week off and just sit and stare at a wall. Like that's not what we're talking about.
Right, right.
Yeah.
You could hear you need at least 2 hours of meditation a day.
Yeah.
Person kind
Yeah.
of feeling like not doing that. But it's so
No.
you said a few things that are really interesting. Um, one of the things that I heard was around how important relationships are, right? Like so talk about that. What are some relationships that we need to start paying attention to and what they're
Mm.
doing to our physiology and how they impact our ability to show up and how illness shows up in our bodies when there's too much stress. Um,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're kind of the catastrophic side effects of our chronic stress. Because, really think about it. When you are stressed, how fun are you? Like when you are really stressed, how empathetic are you? How
mhm,
much do you read the social situation and see that your kid really needs you to pause and take a moment and be with them? Like we miss
mhm,
all of these social cues, and it's not your fault. You are
mhm,
not a worse human being for this. It is the way the brain is designed. So when we're really stressed out, when we have a hit of stress, the amygdala fires up. That's going to perceive we need to fight, we need to flee. It can
mhm,
also perceive like, wow, this is really exciting. Right? So the amygdala is just like, pay attention. And it's linked right next to the hippocampus, which is where memories are stored. So we're going to remember it next time, right? Like this is a scary event, or this is a bad thing, or this is a great thing. And then when that lights up, our prefrontal cortex, right behind the forehead, which does a lot of things, or different parts of it, but I just want to kind of overarchingly, it is your logic and your reasoning. And it's also where social cues are perceived. So the prefrontal cortex, the logic and reasoning brain, is blunted because we don't want to overthink whether we're going to turn left or right when we're running and being chased. We just need to go. So we turn off the analysis because we don't have time for that if we're actually in a situation. But that's going to happen like more and more. So I kind of give the analogy of it's like the drunk guy dancing at the wedding. Like he thinks he's doing an awesome job and he looks awesome. And everybody else is like, that's really not that awesome. But that's who we are under stress influence, right? Under the influence of stress, we think we're just killing it. But over time, we're not. In a short term, yes, you're going to heighten focus. Yes, you're going to heighten blood pressure, heart rate, like all the things that make you dial in and have that energy to do the thing. But over time, we become less and less able to think and reason and actually do a good job. So something that if you are less, if you recover, so you're starting from a less stressed physiology, and then you focus on something, you have more access to creative problem solving, flexible
Mm.
thinking. We're more open. We read social cues, so we have greater influence with people because we can, and but we miss all of that in a narrow stress focus, but we think we're doing really great. And this is the only way it can be. And that's because of the physiology that we are like the influence that we're under from the physiology of stress.
That's
So
right.
wait, relationships is your question. But if we do not have the ability, so anxiety and empathy don't go together. When you're super anxious, if you're an anxious person, like you're really anxious about going to the party, how much are you open to people and experiencing the social cues and compassion? And if you're anxious, it's a pretty self-focused place to be. And I don't mean that to be at all putting anybody down or telling somebody that they're selfish, but the system is designed to defend the system. So when we're in an anxious state, we're really focused on ourselves, like, oh my gosh, are they looking at me? What do they think about me? And it's not because you want to be that way, but it is what is being created in that physiology. So if we can do a simple tool such as taking a breath in and then exhaling longer than we inhale a few times, we calm that fire down. And so we can start to access better parts of ourselves, better parts of our brain. Like just accessing more of the best of who we
Mhm.
are for ourselves and for others creates better connection. And research is really backing up the just the necessity of quality connection to be healthy and vibrant, period. Like it affects our brain health. So being able to connect is important.
Yeah. So what do you say to to someone that's thinking, well, my spouse or my coworker or my child is the source of my stress?
Yeah, valid, right? Valid. And the only thing that we can control is how we choose to show up. And when we really get that, so it's not like blaming you or putting pressure on you. Whoever is going to show up, however they're going to show up, they're going to do that. And okay, but if we can focus on ourselves and creating the best opportunity for ourselves to be the best of who we are, one of the greatest things about coaching is having the opportunity to catch the thoughts that we don't even know are there that keep us
Mhm.
stuck in the loop, stuck in the trap, stuck in the dynamic, stuck in the beating ourselves up. I mean, high achievers have a really strong inner critic typically. And so if we're stuck in this loop, being hammered by our inner critic, and then we have the environmental person who is creating stress, we're not responding. You know, my question would be, are you responding the way that you would like to? If you could pan out and look at the bigger context of your life and who you are and what you want and how you want to be, how would you handle that? Like if you were not stressed, if you were expansive and calm, how would you handle that situation?
Right.
Because that's the only power you have. And then you can make a good choice, you know, how I want to deal with what boundaries I want to put up with my child or my coworker or my spouse. But when we don't give ourselves the space to access and to notice what's going on with us, we're forever in a state of blame and overwhelm. And blame is one that's very easy to access in the stress state.
Right.
That's a that's part of the stress physiology
Right.
outside, right? Everything outside of us is causing it.
So you use the word blame, and let's talk for a second about that company owner or senior leadership person who you hear blaming the teams for,
Mm,
not performing well enough or not producing or not having a sense of urgency or, not meeting deadlines and just using blame and pressure to
mhm.
motivate their teams.
Yeah.
What is an alternative, and what would you say
Yes.
to someone like that?
I would say to that leadership that there's a lot of opportunity to shift what they focus on and how they're inspiring their teams. Because if
Mm.
we are pushing people and we are blaming people, you know, I have this saying like the lowest form of lifting yourself up is by putting someone else down. And that is where we want to go when we're in this stressed state. It's just frustration. You know, when you're mad, stressed, frustrated, you know, frustration is unmet expectation. So in this case, that fits, right? Like I'm expecting everybody to do this and they're not. And it's like taking a step back and looking at how can I bring out the best in people. But we can't do that if we're operating in that narrow bandwidth that we have left in our stress state. So we have to work on ourselves first, right? That leadership team has to start calming the system down so they can access more creative problem solving, more flexible thinking, and be more inspiring. You know, when you expect people to rise to something with positive projection, you get something very different than when
Mhm.
you blame and shame and put them down. You know, shame likes to hide in dark corners. It's not somebody who's going to step up and do more.
That's for sure. Like,
Yeah.
so one of the things we've said often on the podcast is all about, the way you feel is going to impact what kind of action you take. And the minute
Yes.
that you're feeling shameful and you're feeling like, why am I not doing this? And you're feeling that heavy negative energy around like who you are, like the labels that you've placed on yourself for not
Yes.
doing the things that quote unquote you should do, you're not in a state to take inspired action, right? You're not in a state
Oh my
to
gosh. No.
think creatively because it is triggering to your nervous system that you aren't safe. Because if you're this terrible person, right,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to feel like you're in a safe space, that someone's going to
Mm-hmm.
support you, that even yourself, that you're going to support you even, right? Or you're going to be
Yes.
what creates
Well,
safety, right? Is that feeling of love,
yeah.
connection, acceptance, and
Yes.
support. And so if that's missing not just from other people, but from yourself, I think that's um
Well, I think you're saying something very important here because I'm also aware of in that scenario you just gave, there's a leadership team that needs to adjust. Like, right, that's a culture. And then what about the person who's on the receiving end? And what can that person do? One of the
mm,
most stressful things to us, one of the components that create stress is not feeling in control. And
hmm
you think about it. What are you most stressed about? We can angst about a lot of things because we don't have control. If there's something I can control, I feel less stressed about it
hmm
because then there's something I can do.
hmm
So in that situation, it might feel like you don't have any control. So my inquiry would be, what are the things you can control? And then I would go to, sometimes we can change our mind with our mind, but sometimes we need to change our mind with our body. And
mm,
that's the access point. I say that nobody is performing at, like, there's always another level of performance. You're leaving something on the table if you are not taking care of your body. If you
mm,
are not working out regularly, you are leaving something on the table. And what you're leaving mostly on the table is feeling good. One of my taglines is feeling better feels better. So when you hear me say, if you're not exercising regularly and then you feel frustrated because it feels like I'm pushing you to do another thing and it feels like pressure, that is your stress brain. If you decided to go outside and go for a 10-minute walk every single day, you would feel different. You would feel better. You would lower the temperature of stress in your body so you can access more possibility and you would be taking control of something that you can control. So we can always control how we are caring for ourselves and if we're showing up to focus on being our best. One of my favorite like sayings with my clients is like, let's make this no problem. It's no problem. It's no problem if you want to freak out about this stuff. It doesn't mean I'm going to stay here as an employee because I might not want to be in that culture, but it's no problem. What can I focus on that I can do at my best? What can I focus on that changes the way I experience my day? Where do I want to grow? What opportunities do I have to, expand how well I do in this one area, right? Could I become the best salesperson in this arena? Could I learn this new skill? Could I inspire my coworkers? Like, what do you have control of? And you're never going to access that as well if you're not taking some kind of control and agency over what's happening in your own body and system.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I
I
think it's an important control piece.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about control because a lot of times it's like we tell ourselves why something is, terrible,
Oh,
hard, stressful, etc.
yes.
And so it's all about the kind of you're talking about self-talk a lot because all those questions are really uh, choosing to ask ourselves very empowering questions. Okay, how do I make this more fun? How do I make this easier? How do I make this, more interesting? Whatever it is that you feel like you need to feel in order to motivate the action that you want to take. If you ask a how question, you're more likely to get an empowering answer than if you're, focus on,
Yeah.
like you said, on what you can't control. Like,
Yeah.
yes, you're
The
probably going to
story.
be sore.
Yeah.
Right? Like that. Yeah, I mean, we can't control that. If you haven't exercised in a long time and you're getting stronger, you're probably gonna be sore a little bit, right? We're not gonna control that.
Oh
Maybe.
my gosh, but you could control your interpretation of that. Like
Yes.
this is where it gets so fun is when we get into the little cracks and crevices that we usually skip over. Like, yeah, now I'm going to be sore. So we go from the black and the white and we miss everything in between and it's where the magic is because what you have control over is interpreting like this soreness. If I feel sore, I'm like, yes, that means that my cell, I literally picture my cells remantling, getting stronger, becoming better users of fat for fuel, which is a great fuel source. Getting like my mitochondria, the little powerhouses in our cells that create immune system and energy function and all the amazing stuff. Like you feel good, you have a robust system of mitochondria in your cells. And when you're sore, you're creating bigger muscle cells and better muscle cells and more efficient muscle cells. And you're enhancing your immune system and your brain function, and all kinds of cool stuff is happening. So,
Yeah.
this is why I think it's important to understand the mechanisms of what's happening inside of us. When your brain is on fire, we just accept it as truth. I call it like gravity. We don't think about gravity all day long, but it's just there and we accept it. But we have all these stories and thoughts and ways of being that we just accept as truth. But when we can identify what's actually happening, like, oh, I'm catching myself. So I have this process called NDA, notice, decide, and act. And the key feature is notice. We
Mhm.
don't notice these thoughts slip by us, these opinions slip by us, and then we find ourselves suddenly, in a coping strategy, looking
Mhm.
at TikTok,
Mhm.
eating the third bag of chips, whatever. And none of that stuff is wrong. I'm not saying don't ever look at TikTok, don't ever eat chips. It's are we doing this to cope? Is it some kind of coping consumption? Or is there a place where I could take back my power and take care of myself and notice how I'm feeling and nurture myself a little bit so I can access something better?
I love that. Yes, absolutely. And you talk about noticing. It's so true that there's so many systems that kind of go on autopilot. And even myself, like I've had to do a lot of work to like pay attention.
Mhm.
Like, how did
Yeah.
I just lose an hour on, scrolling through social media? I thought it was like 5 minutes, right?
It happens to all of us. It's designed that way.
But it wasn't till I started paying attention that I noticed it happens when I have to do something really uncomfortable or something really uncomfortable is happening. Like my daughter will start a tantrum and I know I don't want to reacting to her in a way that I don't want to. And I'm just like, if I don't remember to like really be present and breathe, my first instinct was to grab the phone because it was
Mhm.
an easy way to not do the thing that I don't want to do and
Yep.
still cope with
Disengage.
my emotional dysregulation. But it was like, okay, I noticed that's a pattern. Then I would notice if I have a deadline to do something and it felt really big, like, oh, just 5 minutes here. Or I would
Yeah.
start it, I would get through the rough part of starting it, and then I would hit, that exhaust, like that, oh, that wall, and it'd be like, oh, just 5 minutes, right? But then that would
Yep.
turn into more than 5 minutes,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
And but it wasn't until like I had to almost like see myself doing the thing. Wait,
Mhm.
it's happening. What's happening around me now that I noticed it? Because otherwise it was just like automatic. It was just
Well, this is
automatic.
what I call the work. Because it takes something to pause. It takes something to catch ourselves. And, I really discovered so much about myself and what I was doing through having my own coach. And there's something about speaking to somebody, having somebody, I think there's
Mhm.
very few times that we get to talk to somebody past the first few thoughts and kind of challenge, yeah, what story do I tell myself about that? What is the thing that I think about that might not be true? We just
Hmm.
let these thoughts go by. So if we're being asked and talking at a deeper level about the things that really matter to us, and then we're catching the thoughts that aren't serving us, now we have the opportunity to know what to notice, right? I know, and sometimes it's I notice that feeling. I know when I feel that, like, oh, there's that feeling, that little catch in my throat or in my tightness in my chest. And that's my trigger to do the unconscious thing, right? And so if I can notice that I'm looking for that, then we have something to go with. Because if you don't know what you're trying to notice, then you're just reacting to life. And that's how a lot of people operate. And the problem is we're hammering on that stress system over and over and over, which incidentally, chronic stress depletes our motivation. So motivation linked to dopamine, which is really the molecule of pursuit. It's not just reward, it's like I want to go get something. And when we are chronically hammering on the stress, we're depleting our dopamine. So then it's that pause that we're like, oh, I don't feel any motivation. And if you are aware that it's going to be uncomfortable and there's something better on the other side, it's easier to wait through the discomfort versus this is uncomfortable and I don't know where this goes. And so I'm going to now default back to a coping mechanism and start the stress cycle all over again, right? So if we can understand that there's going to be some discomfort while we sort of reboot the system, and then I can start to feel motivated again in a healthier way. Now we can start to step into a different process of going through our lives. And it's a better feeling body, it's better feeling brain, and it's better feeling connections, you know?
So for organizations, right, that
Mhm.
want to motivate their workers, are you implying that maybe they should be doing things in the workplace to help their employees engage their bodies in healthier ways? Or like as a leader, knowing these things, what do you recommend they do to motivate their workers rather than keep piling on stress?
Yeah. Oh, what a great question. And absolutely, in this day and age, yes, we do not connect with people by accident as much anymore, right? It used to be like the only way you talk to people was that you went out and talked to people. Now you could just be on social media and get the fake connection. So we have to create opportunities for this. It's not easy in this day and age to move our bodies. Like you could literally sit in a chair all day long and do all kinds of things. We don't have to get up and go do anything. You could have food delivered to you. I
Mhm.
mean, we don't have to, so we have to create it. And I think the only path to something better is to be educated about something better. So I do believe that leaders need to create opportunities for the people that work there to understand how they could feel better. And, if I'm working at a company and I feel like my employer cares about me and wants something better for me and is a part of my own personal growth,
Right.
I'm going to feel like I'm somewhere where I'm cared about. And that matters so much to our systems, right? So feeling cared for and caring for others are, it's a back and forth system that we need both sides. But I think absolutely, not just, up to any kind of organization or leader, whether it's appropriate for your company to implement some kind of, I don't know, fitness challenge or something, but just having this like supportive system within the company to educate people and to inspire people. Like you are going to have better productivity,
Right.
lower healthcare costs. I mean, it's like over $300 billion a year that's lost in productivity and healthcare costs due to stress.
Right.
Stress alone. So
And
can we make
yeah.
something different happen? It's going to take something. It doesn't just happen reactively.
And I know a lot of what you're talking about is the release of certain hormones, and that physiology, but a lot of it is, connected to the nervous system. And when
Yeah.
you feel cared for and you feel like you're safe rather than in danger all the time,
Yes.
you do open up your mind to be more creative. You do open up your mind to be, more innovative or collaborative,
Hmm.
like you said. And so that also goes back to even connection will release dopamine, right? Like if you are
Hmm.
going to a place where people are excited about what they're working on, they're releasing dopamine, which, like you said, is that
Pursuit.
pursuit. They're motivated, as opposed to releasing cortisol,
Yes.
which is going to then create an environment where, and energy is like, because at the end of the day, what we're kind of talking about is energy, right? Do we have the energy
Absolutely.
to do the things that we need to do? And
Yes.
energy is contagious, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So you are speaking to the science in a different way because the sympathetic nervous system is your stressed out nervous system. When you're in fight and flight, sympathetic nervous system is firing. What that's doing is doing acute short-term survival tactics. What it's not doing is turning off long-term projects like digestion, like reproduction, like chronic immune system functioning. So that's why we see an increase in digestive issues, fertility issues, and chronic diseases because that sympathetic nervous system is not designed for long-term projects, period. And then the parasympathetic nervous system is the I'm safe, I'm calm, I'm resting, I'm digesting, all is good. It's like sympathetic is we're on the hunt.
Mm-hmm.
Parasympathetic is we're sharing that meal with the tribe, right?
Mm-hmm.
So connection is a part of that for sure. So if we can feel more connected and less competitive with each other, then like I understand that competition drives motivation to pursue. But again, that one isn't black and white, right? It's like, how can I be competitive and also be compassionate? Like, how could we master these things? How can I do the hard thing and bring joy to it? How can I be a master of this? Well, you're not going to do it if you're constantly firing on that chronic stress. So when we can calm the sympathetic, they work in opposition, fire up the parasympathetic nervous system. So we're cueing our body for rest and connection. Now we have access to the creative solving, the flexible thinking. And the funniest thing about that is it actually gives you the competitive edge. If I'm going to hire a lawyer who's all stressed out and in this narrow focus and inflexible thinking and da, 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 versus the lawyer who has expansive focus, creative thinking, problem solving, like can connect, can influence, who do I want? Right?
Right.
So it's like who's actually going to win? It's not the
Mm-hmm.
person who's just driving harder and narrowing their focus. That system just doesn't work for long term.
Mm-hmm.
So more success, I say, comes from having less chronic stress, but leveraging it the way we can use it. So I allow for myself to get the hit of stress before a presentation. And then after the presentation, what am I doing to allow myself to calm down? Right? So
Yeah.
it's all in the recovery. Yeah.
Do you think that there's certain stress that is always bad, I guess?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question because that's you're making me have to really think. Certain stress that is always bad because like stress is designed to keep us safe, right? Stress is designed to make us move. So the only kind
Mhm.
of stress that is always bad is just chronic stress, chronic, like hitting that baseline. And you know you're under chronic stress if you are not able to sleep well, you wake up tired. That's an indicator of chronic stress.
So what I heard in what you said when you said I'm sorry, stress is made to make us move. It's almost like what I heard was the stress that is bad is the kind that you ignore,
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
if it's a system that's in place to cause us to take some kind of action, and then
Mm-hmm.
we either don't take the action to
Mm-hmm.
like get through it
Mm-hmm.
or to move away from it, then
Mm-hmm.
that is how it kind of becomes that
Chronic.
chronic stress, right?
That is really good. Yes, the stress that you ignore. So in this little model I've designed, notice is the first step because if you don't even recognize it's happening, you're coping before you even know it, right? And then the next thing is to decide. And if you have a toolbox of the next best action to take, then you have a different choice to make, right? Like, okay, I'm noticing I'm really stressed out. What do I need to decide here? Do I decide I need to calm myself down? I'm going to push away from my desk, look in an expansive view, take a few deep breaths. Do I need to make a phone call? Do I need to take some kind of action? I have to decide what the next course of action is. And then the third thing is to act, but it's to act on the thing that you noticed so that I'm not acting in reaction, but I'm acting in my best interest. And sometimes that takes a little bit of discipline. It's
Yeah.
hard to push away when we're in that stress, right? It's hard to stop and close our eyes and take a few deep breaths. It's hard to do the thing when we just want to stay going as the guy who's had too much to drink and is dancing because we're like, no, I'm doing a really good job. But you've got to start learning your own body.
So, transparency, what goes through my mind is actually my parents just retired.
Yeah.
And like my father, for a few years now, I've heard a theme of like, no, that's too much stress. I'm not going to do that. No, that's too much stress. And at some point recently, because they're selling their house and stuff, I mentioned renting their house instead of selling it. And he was like, no, that's too much stress. I'm not in a position to take on any more stress, right? And it's like, it's recurring. It's the story he tells himself.
Yeah.
Um, and I understand he had a lot of stress in his career and his life.
Right.
But I think watching my dad
Mm-hmm.
probably influenced me a lot too, right? About how I manage stress. But I know that he allows stress to like consume him, right?
Yes. He sounds like
And
he's aware of that.
the thing is, so what do I mean by that? Do you recognize that we almost by our interpretation of what stress means or a stressful situation, we can kind of like create it for ourselves almost. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
As a
Absolutely.
It's a perspective thing. So what do you
Yes.
think is an unhealthy versus a healthy relationship with stress?
That's great. Because stress, honestly, stress is not in the event itself. It is in our relationship to the event.
Right.
So something can happen, and one person is like, oh, that was great. And another person is like, oh, yeah, it was so stressful.
Mm.
Example, my husband and I went to Paris for our honeymoon, and I was at the top of the Eiffel Tower. I had no expectation for this to happen. I was already feeling anxious because my two little kids were at home and one was struggling, and then got to the top and I saw over the edge, and the next thing I knew, I was pinned against the brick wall, like on the inside, having a panic attack. And I wasn't planning on that, but my nervous system had just had too much. And other people were like looking out over the side and taking pictures and stuff and having the greatest time. So it wasn't a fact that this needed to be stressful. It was how I interpreted it in that moment and talking about not feeling safe, the nervous system, because my body was already kind of primed for, I just needed one more straw to put me over the edge. So when we consume something, like we take on a task, we take on a project, we can either think of it as it's no problem, how could I have fun with this? Or we could put a whole bunch of pressure on ourselves to do it right. And now I have all this stress and overwhelm and I got to
Mm,
figure it out. And my identity is now based on how well am I doing this? Am I getting an A?
mm,
It's that external measure of self-worth. And then we're just handing our power over to something outside of us, where our real power lies in how we want to relate to the very thing that we're calling stress. So is it a project I'm taking on? And I could look at it as, how could I have fun with this? I love that question. How could I have fun with this? Or how could I make this easy? Or how could I handle this that would feel good to me?
mm-hmm.
What part of this do I like? Could I delegate? Could I, like we can
Yeah.
do so many things that we don't realize are options when our
Yeah.
only focus is I'm taking on all the pressure and stress and now
Mm-hmm.
I'm overwhelmed and now so then it becomes very black and white.
Mm-hmm.
No, I can't do anything. This is too hard. I use the exercise example a lot for obvious reasons, but it's one of the things people feel about exercise is like I've either got to go all in and it's too hard or I'm not doing it, or like how we frame it really matters.
Yeah, it's funny that you say I bring it back to exercise because honestly, one of the key learnings for me in coaching was I had a friend, a fitness slash mindset coach that had a program he called Renewed Mindset. It was like a 2 day intense program that
Hmm.
was meant to use physiology
Hmm.
to understand how your relationship to
Hmm.
stress work, basically. Because what I learned from that experience is your mind and your body kind of process stress the same way. Like whether it's a mental struggle or an emotional struggle
Hmm.
or a physical struggle, the the stories you tell yourself are kind of the same. And so the
Yeah.
fastest way to get real insight to how you think about yourself, the world around you, stress in general, is to put yourself in that under physical stress. It's like the easiest way to like do that work because you can
Yes.
put yourself in a state really quickly and then give yourself the space to notice it
Hmm.
it just depends how far you push your body, right? So the whole
Hmm.
concept of the exercise, and mind you, like I went into that already as a coach thinking mind over matter. I'm running a half marathon this year, right? And it was like I am no matter what. I had already told myself no matter what, I'm not giving up,
Yeah.
right? And but what I noticed were themes, right, in what was happening during the exercise versus what was happening in my life because
Hmm.
it definitely pushed me far beyond anything I had ever done physically. And as a run as an endurance runner, right, I've pushed myself pretty far, but then we also had soul crushers, which are exactly what they sound like. And as someone that had never lifted in her life, I ended up getting rhabdomyolysis, which I do not recommend. Don't do that. Right? But that's how far, through I went in that exercise. I had just lost my husband, I guess the year prior at that point, year or 2 years, 2 years, I think. And then it was that feeling like I'm just so tired and life is feeling really hard and I'm tired of being
I think,
strong.
well, yes, yes. And what's fascinating to me is that you were in that state and it's very telling. And you decided to go do something that included soul crushers, right? So it's very telling about that state. The system defends the system.
Mm,
And you were defending that system of it's going to be hard and I'm going to be stronger. It's going to be hard and
right.
I'm going to do it anyway. And that can be really great until it's not. And it's not when you get rhabdo. And it's
Yeah.
not because that could kill you. And it's not
Yes.
when, yeah, and it's not when we're burning down the other things in our lives that matter. A real valid question for everybody to just ask themselves is why? Like, what's my why? Why am I pushing myself so hard? Why am I doing this? Because we wind up having a very narrow focus of reality, and
Mm,
it's not necessarily the bigger context of the life we want. And it starts with what I call the adulting lie, which is once I get through this week, once I get through this project, once I get through this month, once this year ends, once this quarter's over,
mm,
then I'll be able to enjoy my, right? It's always okay, well, once I get to, and then there's just the next thing. It's like waves, they just keep tumbling in.
yeah.
So we have to step back and take a stand for ourselves and make a choice that we want to take care of ourselves, that we are worth it. That's a really big statement of mine that I say over and over again. It's like, what would it take for you to be worth it? To be worth the grace, worth the effort and the discomfort of pausing so you can enjoy your life more.
Yeah.
That's really what it's about. Like, who wants to have $1 million and your family hates you?
Yeah. One of the things I will say though is in my experience, a coach taught me this once, and I really do hold firm to it now, is that a why question always implies you're doing something, not always, but mostly implies that you're doing something wrong. Like,
Mm.
why are you doing the thing that you shouldn't be doing?
Yeah.
There's some
Well, but it's
judgment
like, what if the answer is
associated.
I'm doing this because I want the promotion and there's a distinct end to it, but what's that promotion going to get me? That promotion is going to get me more opportunity. Do I want to keep showing up in this same way? Is it going to slow down? Like, why am I doing this in this context? Is like, it's not a necessarily is it right or wrong? It's just pause
Yeah.
and let's look at the bigger context of your life.
I hear the sentiment behind it is not that judgment, and it's not, it sometimes it's like justify this for me kind of a intention. But what
Yep.
I found is that semantically it just helps to use like a what question. Like, what is it
hmm
about this
hmm
that's so important? What is it about this that keeps you doing it or not
hmm
doing the other
hmm
thing that you want to do?
Yep.
It almost softens the feeling in your body about, well, because, like
Yeah.
defense mode as opposed
Yeah.
to
I'm 100% on board with that. As a matter of fact, when I coach, it's very seldom that I will ask a why question.
right.
But in this context, when you are on the steam locomotive going 100 miles an hour, you have to have a sharper question to say, like, why? Like, what is my why? And yes, I think why can bring up a lot of defensiveness. And also, why can be just a sharper stop. Like, let me look at this. Why am I doing this? I've had to do that for myself.
Mm.
Why am I doing all of this when my daughter is only going to be in my home for a few more years? That was a few years ago. She isn't anymore. And so she's only going to be here for a few more years. Like, why am I pushing myself so hard and so unavailable for this relationship that really matters? In that context, if I ask myself, what is this giving me? I don't think I would have the like cold water in my face stop.
Yeah, I mean, I think
No?
in that specific scenario, I'd probably ask you, what are you missing out on by doing
Yeah.
this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Great add-on question. And I think they all work.
Yeah.
I fully am on board with your sentiments about why, because it does. Why are you doing that? Why is it,
Yeah.
there's a why and then there's a why, like, oh, why? Why do you think this is possible? Why do you think there's a why and there's a why? But we can read it all as the same tone, right? It doesn't necessarily matter. So if there's a nuanced what question that works better, 100%. So I think we should come up with that nuanced question. And I liked yours. Like what are you getting? What are you missing?
Well, it's one in this context, it would be what are you missing out on by doing
Mhm.
this? Like, or, what are you sacrificing for this?
Mhm.
Um, there's a lot of ways to get, at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is get curious about
Yes.
your behavior, about
Yeah.
what's driving you to do the things that you do.
Yes. And in this context, I think it requires challenging yourself to think more broadly because that narrow stressed mind, like that mental focus that becomes narrow and we don't think it is, but it is,
Yeah.
really is the tell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I I heard you say, um, that dopamine and like basically emotion kind of registers in your memory that this was a good
Mm,
thing, right? Like it creates lasting relationship with that event to be a
yes.
good thing. And so what I hear a lot from high performers is like they don't want to, they don't see the value or they have a hard time
Hmm.
with engaging in fun, right? I mean, went through this too, right? And it's interesting that you say that it actually turns on the memory centers and says basically work is good. Like do,
Yep.
makes you want to do that more. And everything we talk about, even in high performance, is around when you're enthusiastic about your work, right? Is when you
Yep.
are most productive. And
Yep.
so when you talk about working with lawyers, because I know you've said you work with lawyers,
Yeah.
like, I think there's like, what is fun about, right?
Yeah.
About being a lawyer? How do you use that? Or is there a way to use that? Or am I thinking about it, not in the same way that maybe I should
Yes.
be thinking about it? But could you use fun, enthusiasm, um, these feel good hormones to associate your work with something that makes you more productive, more motivated, more
Yes.
engaged.
Yes. Great question. And I agree. I'm like, I I am married to a lawyer, so I do not have a do not have a negative bias about lawyers. However, I don't hear the word lawyer and go, wow, that's so much fun, right?
Right.
It's very like
Yeah.
law.
Yeah.
However, mastery as a human being is to be able to cultivate enthusiasm for the thing we're doing, like some kind of passion or interest or curiosity or engagement. And there are pockets to apply that in any arena. So if I chose law, I know people choose their careers for different reasons, and some of them aren't because it's the thing that lights them up. But if I chose law, could I challenge myself to find the thing that is enjoyable, that I like about it? So I have this project coming in, and I can either think of it as overwhelm, or
Hmm.
I could think about it as like, oh, this is going to be an interesting challenge. Where could I find the interest? We don't see that if we're just hammering on overwhelm and stress. So we're going to deplete our dopamine stores with that. And can we think about the thing instead of as a chore, which actually diminishes dopamine, but think of it as a challenge? Because high performers like a challenge, right? We don't want
Hmm.
the easy street. I mean, sometimes it'd be nice, but in general, like we want to keep achieving. Like that's growth, that's expansion, that's
Hmm.
fun, that's interesting. And so if we focus on what is challenging and interesting about it, then we can bring some element of joy to the very thing that we're doing. And it doesn't matter how narrow we need to get our context, like, wow, figuring out the exact right semantics to use in this proposal, whatever it is really interesting to me. That's an interesting challenge. If I focus on how interesting the challenge is, that's different than the overwhelm of the task, right? Or I could look at a broader, expansive thing like, wow, if I could get this right, then I would have the opportunity to present this to this other group of people. And I'm really interested in meeting these people. Now I'm expanding what my context is in my brain of what's possible
Hmm.
instead of focusing on just the overwhelm. And I when working in fitness, I really like working with people who are unmotivated and overweight and feel like they can't do it. Don't give me the athlete that needs to go faster. Give me the person who has a big challenge with creating motivation. That was always my interest. And I think that's why I chose lawyers. Because give me the people who have the job that could be seen as just stressful and overwhelming. And that's a fact. And okay, it could be a fact, or could it be challenging and exciting and expansive?
I love that. I love
Yeah.
it. As we were talking here, I thought about my late husband. He was an IT person, and there's IT people that are just grouchy. What do you need? Like
Yeah.
they deal. And before that, he was in tech support, which is like the people that are calling you are not happy, right?
Right.
Like
Sure.
you can't think of a
Talk
more
about
like
a challenge.
I can't think of like a more kind of miserable job if you look
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
that perspective of it, right? Like people are
Yeah.
just calling to complain to you. And yet, for the whole time that I've known him, that I had known him in his career, he would always walked around with a smile. And he just
There you
like
go.
he just had this like like he challenged himself to make
Yeah.
everyone that he came in contact with smile, like have a laugh.
Full body chills over here because that is possibly the most brilliant and beautiful challenge that there is. And I was thinking that when you're talking about like anybody in customer service or something like that, you're going to deal with people who are starting out with complaint.
Yeah.
And if you can see, if you can, you have to reset, right? You have to
Yeah.
be intentional about setting yourself up to have the energy to do that thing.
Right.
But if you can do that for yourself and cultivate that kind of motivation and challenge to see if I can turn this person's like way of being around and make them smile. What a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's so true. And it wasn't until like maybe like when he was on his way to the hospital, even like where he said something like, "I just can't help myself. I really feel like I have to crack a joke no matter what." And sometimes I have to stop myself if it's a really like not good situation to be telling a
Yeah,
joke, but
yeah.
most of the time I just have to. And he would just I remember he spent a lot of time just watching comedic
Hmm.
shows, right? And I think he just knew to like stay in that state of like there's humor in everything. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
That's actually really brilliant. Is when we are laughing, we're releasing oxytocin and dopamine and all the feel-good chemicals and serotonin, like all the things that the cocktail we want.
Mm,
And it's so good for our bodies. Like our so many good things happen when we feel joyful. And what's really cool about being human, we are like one of the only species that can anticipate fear or joy, but I think we're the only one that can cultivate absolute terror or joy without anything happening around us, without any
mm,
cue to tell us, my dog hears a beep, he starts shaking because he learned that, but he had to learn it first. But if I can cultivate, I could sit here and like work myself into a state of terror, or I could sit here and think about puppies or whatever it is that
yeah,
makes me happy and cultivate a whole sense of joy. I could anticipate what's possible if I could connect with, like, if we just keep growing our thought process of what's possible and what we love, we change our state and that changes how we show up. And I'm willing to bet that people really responded to your husband, which is a self-feeding thing, right? Because
yeah,
then he feels better and he feels happier. And then, like, we're creating so much more energy and positivity and productivity,
yeah,
possibility, all the P's, if we start showing up for being intentional about our state. But it's
yes,
really hard to get there if we are underslept, undernourished, overfed, underexercised, underhydrated. If we are depleting the system, how can we expect it to do what we want?
yeah. And actually, when you talk about being intentional about these things, it does go hand in hand with our like perspectives of personality or how we just are. And
Yes.
right?
Yes.
I'm
Yes, the
just not an
limiting
athlete
beliefs, like,
is
is
one
just
of
how I
those.
am.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
That's just
Yes,
how I
I
am.
love challenging that perspective, right? Because
Yeah.
like maybe you haven't been an athlete yet.
Right.
Who knows? Right? Maybe you haven't figured out something that you could figure out.
Well, it's really about you can do anything that you perceive to be important enough to for you to put the work in to do it, right? Like that sounded clumsy, but it's basically like I do believe that people are capable of anything as
Hmm.
long as going back to the controversial question, you have a strong enough why, right? Like as long as you have
It's now
enough
labeled a controversial
reason.
question. Yeah.
Well, as long as you have
Yeah.
a strong enough reason to pursue it,
Hmm.
um, you can do anything. But if you
Hmm.
don't feel like if you don't think really, because it's not even a feeling, if you don't think that it's worth the
Hmm.
pain and the sacrifice and the time and all that it takes, then you're not going to do it. But
Well, and it's really hard on the front side before you've had an achievement or an accomplishment or you've experienced what's like if you don't know what's out there, it's really hard to pursue something. When I ran my first half marathon, I was just like, okay, I just want to be able to finish this thing.
hmm
I went really slow. And then when I got to the end, I mean, when I finished that, it was such a huge feeling of accomplishment. And then I thought I could have done that so much faster. So I did it again. And then I thought I could have gone faster than that. So I set a new goal for myself. But the only way that I was at that starting line, which is the part, the week leading up to it and the morning of, is the part where for me personally, I was like, what is wrong with me? I don't want to do this. I'm all
mm,
stressed out about Saturday morning when I could just like have a lovely slow morning with my coffee. Nobody's making me do this thing.
yeah.
But the feeling of having accomplished something that I had at the finish line did not leave my brain. And so knowing that there's something bigger and better on the other side if we are going towards the goals that are in alignment with what we really want.
Yeah.
Right. And so if I really want to have, like, to prove to myself that I can do this for myself, I wasn't doing it for anybody but me, then I'm willing to suffer through the discipline and the running in the rain and whatever that takes. Because there's also, going back to the stress thing, there's a sense of control and confidence and trust in myself that I am creating, like
Right.
going back to control my feeling of control over my actions and behaviors, now that spills over into believing I can control how I show up for other things instead of thinking, I can't help it. I just blow up every time this happens. When I start teaching myself that there is control like accessible to me, that's very reinforcing for me to feel like I have control of my life. So one thing changes a lot of things. So I always tell people to pick the one thing that you're going to commit to, that you want to notice, so you can start on the path of deciding and taking action towards what you really want in life. So you don't just suddenly find yourself on a hill all alone because you've burned down your relationships, you know? So,
Well, what I love about what you said is back to the connection of your body with your way of perceiving things. It's like if you want more confidence, sometimes that just takes doing the hard things. And sometimes that one thing is actually doing something really hard physically to
yep.
prove to yourself that you can do hard things and that you do keep the promises to yourself. And
Hmm.
that confidence then you can apply to your career, to that tight
Yes.
deadline, to that dream that feels impossible. Like doing it physically feels sometimes more accessible
Hmm.
than the emotional, mental challenge, right?
Oh my gosh. Well, the coolest thing about doing something physically is that you have an immediate effect.
Mm.
So, just in the spirit of understanding the system, when you first start exercising, it feels terrible. It really does. It does not feel
Yeah.
good. It's not like, whoa, that was a great jog. It just feels bad. And the reason it feels bad is because you are wiring up your nervous system to handle a different load of stress. That is what you are doing. And that nervous system wiring feels bad. That's your nervous system being like, what are we doing? This is stressful. And so we're designed to be like, oh, that's bad. I hate it. But you have to know in a broader context that if you stay with it for a few weeks, like 2 to 3 weeks of exercising 2 to 3 times, I say by like maybe the ninth or 10th time you exercise, it starts to feel a lot better. And so
Yeah.
if you can stick with it, and sometimes, I mean, that's a really loose number. This is not hard math, but if you can stick with it and you know it's going to feel better, here's what is actually happening. You'll notice you have better focus, you have better mental energy, you have better energy in general. You are more productive. You're in a better mood. When we flex our muscles, they release hormones to our brain that is called the hormone of hope because it hits on the centers of our brains that make us feel better. So when you start feeling better, you start doing more. And when you start doing more, you start reinforcing feeling better. When you start feeling better, you start connecting more. Then that connection reinforces feeling better. So we
Mm.
start creating a different story just from the act of exercising alone. You
Yeah.
sleep better. And then, like, the whole thing just follows. But
Yeah.
there's the long-term goal kind of thing, but there's also, God, this is going to make my day better.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that the hope hormone because
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things.
I w- I would say probably one of the biggest, I don't know, this is kind of like a big statement to say, but I think one of the biggest ways that we can stay resilient is to hang on to hope, right? So when
Yeah.
you say the hope hormone, and I think about like, endurance training or,
Mhm.
just going through a really long emotional goal or a long commitment. I think about like going to grad school, losing your
Mhm.
husband, just even like childbirth or even raising a
Yeah.
child, like anything that feels really hard and is going to take longer than you feel like you can resist it.
Mhm.
It's going to take some like hanging on to, we're almost there. It's going to be better. It's going to be great
Mhm.
at the end. That like
Mhm.
reaching for the end kind of like that,
Yeah.
that it's coming. Um,
Yeah. But can you rest along the way? Can you recover along the way? I think that's a very important piece. And to just to carry through the fitness analogy, when we're first starting out, we can maybe, some of us could just walk for a couple minutes and then we need to rest. Some of
mm,
us could jog for a couple minutes and we need to walk. But it's how can you recover along the way so you can keep going? And
right,
when we just stress and stress and stress and stress and stress, and this is our new baseline, we do crash and burn at some point. Something like the wheels are going to come off the bus at some point.
right.
So it's recovery along the way.
Yeah, that's really good. Um, and even the thought of one of the things I wrote down for myself is like stress is the feel not feeling in control, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love that
Mm-hmm.
because that also
Yeah.
implies like I'm not in control of like when this will end. This is one of those stressful kind of feelings. And so then the next thing is, well, then how do I get through this? How do
Mm-hmm.
I,
Mm-hmm.
give myself the rest, like you said?
Yes. And one of the things that a lot of animals do under stress, and we are no different, is we displace stress by putting like pushing it off onto people who are sort of quote lower ranking. This is the concept of like kicking the dog, right?
Mm,
That, like, which is a horrible thing to picture. So I'm sorry I said that, but but it's just that the thing like we snap at our kids or we snap at our spouse or because we can't snap at our boss. So it's like where can we offload the tension and stress and take it out on someone else? And then we feel better, but the other person feels worse. I think of it like we just threw up on somebody. I feel better because I just threw up, but now I just threw up on my kid, and so they're dealing with the mess that they have to clean up now. So when we sort of discharge our stress onto somebody else, now we're just creating like a really toxic cycle. So the value in finding the ways to address your stress is like I don't know that this is talked about enough, period.
Yeah. Because you're right. Like that impacts so many other things. Like this is not just about you and whether you can handle your stress. This is about like what now your kid is taking to school with them or all that
Mhm.
complaining about your kids fighting. Are they under a lot of stress? Are they offloading onto their younger sibling
Yeah.
because the adults aren't able to handle their stress? Are you not teaching them ways for them to handle their stress so that they're not lashing out
Mhm.
at the siblings. Um, and then are they the bully at school now?
Mhm.
And this is just unfortunately really their skills that a lot of us didn't even like learn. And so it makes
Oh
sense.
my gosh. Well, when you're talking about skills we didn't learn, as high achieving people, there is a greater requirement for us to manage the stress of achievement. Yet we're not invited to do that. We're not taught to do that. We aren't taught about that. Like it doesn't even occur to anybody. And just that little pocket of noticing, okay, now it's time for me to just sit in the discomfort of feeling bored or feeling antsy or feeling unproductive because I need to reset my nervous system. Like speaking of language, like if I have language about that, like I'm resetting my nervous system. Now I have an understanding of what this feeling is that's not comfortable. And so I don't just have to react to it unconsciously and turn on Netflix and check out. I mean, maybe that's my choice for resetting, but am I
Mhm.
making that choice intentionally or unconsciously?
See, what comes to mind is I had a recent conversation because a friend of mine posted a like story of why you shouldn't be lazy. And it referenced like I don't remember exactly what it said, but it hit a nerve with me because to me, that sounds like a label that you're placing on someone that needs rest. And then he was
Mhm.
very vulnerable and talked about, what his experience was. And, on, at a different point in my life, I would consider that I was lazy and I didn't do things that I should have been doing for my future. And I asked him, what do you think would make someone choose not to do something that was, good for their future? Do you
Mhm.
really believe that you were trying to aim for a future that was, not
Mhm.
desirable? Like it's not something
Right,
that we want, right? So what would make
right.
you do that? And it was like, well, at the time, I didn't think I was in control of my future. And so when you said stress is feeling out of
Yeah.
control, I was like, I really feel that I would say nobody's really lazy. Like,
Oh, y-
and you have something to say about this, and I want you to share it because it's important, right? 'Cause to understand how our body
mhm.
is wired. But at the same time, it's like, okay, you felt out of control. What was going on in your life that
Mhm.
made you believe that things were out of your control? Like there had to be a massive amount of stress in your life that you felt like you had to live like for right now, that you were um
Yeah.
not
Surviving.
that you were surviving, that you weren't looking at the future, that it felt better to stay doing what was comfortable. And what was interesting about the insight that you brought in is that, oh, okay, well, that even makes physiological sense, what you're saying. And so when
Yeah.
we talk about being lazy, what
Yes.
what is that saying about our bodies and how we interpret what's happening in our
I
bodies?
have two things to say on this one. And the first is the way you just described that. The term is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And the last ones are like staying really still.
Hmm.
That's survival, right? That's the stress nervous system staying still. But aside from that, so that is one component. But aside from that, we are not designed to want to change states. We want to conserve energy biologically in case of a famine, in case we've got to go like run far and chase something. So we are designed to conserve energy. We're not designed to want to just jump up and go for a jog when we're sitting and very comfortable in our PJs drinking our coffee. So it takes acknowledging that and taking steps towards it, like the process of getting dressed to go exercise. Again, using that as an analogy, but you could put it anywhere. The process of getting up to go, sign up for the class or do the thing
Yeah.
that's going to make your
Send the
future better.
email.
Like the
Yeah.
first next step. Yes. It's like identifying what's the first next step and then just doing that. Because it's too overwhelming to think of myself out jogging right now because I'm like perfectly comfortable how I am. But if I get in motion in baby steps, it's easier to stay in motion and to build motion,
Mhm.
right? So it can be really hard to get started. And the tiniest first next step is all we need to focus on. And then the next step after that, and the next step after that, because the bigger thing is just too much.
Yeah.
But, beating ourselves up and shaming ourselves into our laziness and the inner critic is really what pushes us down further instead of lifting us up to get into motion.
Yeah. And the issue with using words like lazy is not just like how you're labeling yourself. It's also
Uh-huh.
like now you've given terminology for someone
Yes.
else to shame themselves as well.
Yes. Yes, shame is never a mobilizer. Shame is
Yeah.
like, shame hides. Like, if you really think about it, when you are feeling ashamed, you want the floor to swallow you up.
Right.
And so, anytime we're pushing ourselves more into shame, whether it's how we were spoken to when we were younger or however we've learned the shame cycle, it's not the one that's going to push you into action.
Right.
It's the one that's going to shut you down. And so, just shifting it a little bit. And sometimes that's just even, taking a few breaths and changing your state that way because you don't have to get up and move, but
Mm.
just doing anything to catch, to notice when you're doing the shaming inner critic, that's the best first next step.
Yeah.
And then you can question that. Is it true?
And I called myself very lazy even just after having lost my husband because I just wasn't used to like not
Yeah.
doing more.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
my nervous system was just like, this is not safe, not safe, not safe. And it did kind of
Yeah.
put me in that free state. Like I felt like I could not move. And yet there was all this judgment around it because I'm like, I know I want to do these things and I can't
Mhm.
seem to do them. And the more I did that, the less I was able to like kind of take even the smaller
Yes.
step because I was feeling even
Yes,
worse
I
about
I would
myself.
argue that it would extend it longer. The more
Right.
we can nurture and take care of ourselves, and it doesn't mean coddle ourselves into doing nothing ever, but it's like trusting that the motivation is like it's there and I'm building it back. And then putting ourselves in environments or in like
Right.
creating some demands on ourselves to get to decide that we want to take action,
Hmm.
right? And step up. I'm not saying put yourself into a deep, dark depression and just stay there because that's fine, right? So there's all of this has a lot of gray area, and that's just how it is.
And I think what was helpful for me, and maybe that's just because I'm very in my head, but for me, what was helpful was understanding
Hmm.
the nervous system, understanding what my body was going through. And
Yes.
so then I could kind of extend grace because I think there was an
Yes.
underlying belief there's something wrong with me.
Yeah, of course there was.
Right.
And thank you for saying that because I think that is a great way to kind of to tie this all in a neat bow is that when we can have a greater understanding of ourselves and our physiology and our what's happening, then we have power to make a new choice that's going to best support us and best because we all deserve to live these joyful, abundant, thriving, growing, expanding, serving, giving, receiving, like these amazing lives. And we just put ourselves in smaller and smaller and smaller boxes of shame when we don't understand. And so we interpret it as there's something wrong with me. And then we just function in the cycle of stress. So that is like my mission is to help people understand stress physiology better so you can motivate more and you can live the life you want to have in a body you love.
Yes. And to use that to make it accessible to everybody. There's nobody that this is not accessible to, right?
That's right. And in companies, in teams, like having a thriving team that is positive and uplifting for each other and competing at a very high level because they're functioning at a high level is a great goal. And I know that we can't do it alone, right? That's why we have coaches and teachers in the world, because it's not something that you can now just pile onto yourself like I should be able to do it myself. That's the fastest way to not do anything.
Right. And so if someone is looking for a great coach that is going to help them get their physiology in the optimal space to be the most motivated and pursue their goals and they're struggling, like you said, you love that challenge.
Yes.
How do they reach out to you?
Yeah, great question. So I have Reenergize, R-E-E, Reenergize coaching.com is my website. Like I actually, you said earlier, energy is sort of what we're talking about, and it's so true. And I have the word re-energize is my brand. So reenergizecoaching.com is my website. I will send you access to the recording of my webinar, Stress Less and Motivate More. And I have a PDF that I'll send everybody. And so you can definitely find me in any of those places. M Luna Fitness. I'm on LinkedIn. So I love the conversation and I love this work. I think it's really important work. I think it is the work we all need to do before we do all the other work. So
That's true.
yeah, I
I love
love
that.
talking about it.
Thanks so much, Marcy. This has been wonderful. I think you gave lots of people a lot to think about. And I think that some of these very practical ways of like thinking differently about their situations and about stress and about motivation can really impact a lot of lives and teams. And if they want to dig deeper, I think your webinar is a great tool. But also, I know you have a free PDF about different things that you can do to kind of calm the nervous system and take the rest that's needed to re-energize. And so I think that you're a great resource for our listeners. Thank you so much, Marcy.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Till next time.
All right. Bye.
Thank you for tuning into today's episode of Courage and Purpose. I hope today's insights inspired you to take bold action and align your life and career with what truly matters to you. If you're ready to dive deeper, I invite you to download my free Action Indicator Assessment, a powerful tool to help you uncover what's holding you back and take the next step towards clarity and confidence. Just visit www.lifeonpurpose.coach/action indicator to get started today. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with someone who could use a little extra courage on their journey. Until next time, stay true to your purpose, lead with courage, and keep thriving. I'll see you in the next episode.